Okay, and we are back, and as you can see here, the wood glue has dried up pretty well. There's still a little bit of tackiness to it because it's really not been that long. Another thing that you can see I did here was I covered the shot cord with extra glue and then taped down over. Rather than cutting off that pigtail of the shot cord, I just decided to tape over it like that. That'll keep everything nice and secure and give me just a little bit of extra just in case if the knot decides to try and come undone. But everything there is looking pretty good, and I think we're about ready to bond it into the body tube. And let me get these out of the way because this was just something else I was doing while I was waiting for the glue to dry. So that's a different model. And what we're going to do now is get this part of the motor mount and set it into the body tube here, and we're going to use the flats so that it slides right by like so. And if you can see here, I'll do it outside first. What we're going to do is we're going to get this pushed inside just far enough so that this centering ring is just past this section right here. And just as to dry fit it, you can see them sliding through. You can see both centering rings here and here right now. We're going to push it through so that it's just past there like so that we can put our fins in, and our fins will engage like that on the inside there. So in order to get the glue that far in, we're going to need, if you've not used these before, these are fantastic. These are extra large Q-tips. You can buy them on Amazon or eBay or pretty much anywhere. They're what, about 6 inches long? Yeah, they're 6 inches long. You got a big cotton bud at the end, and they work really, really well for getting down into deep crevices. See, I can go all the way down here easily, and I won't be able to get down. Like I wouldn't be, if once I'm done with this, I am going to want to find some way of getting down to about here on the body tube, because this will be sitting like so. And obviously I'm not going to be able to fit that far. But what I will be able to do is take a little tape and take a brass rod and tape the bud to a brass rod like that, and I'll be able to easily get down that far this way. But we'll cross that bridge in just a minute. To start with, though, let's go ahead and put some glue in a disposable plastic cup. That's more than enough, I'm sure. Now, as I slide this in, just like with any low power model, as I slide this in, it's going to push the glue forward, so I don't really have to try and get glue in both sections right here, because anything that I push forward is going to get all the way up to here. And then what I'll do is I'll come back from behind with this and do a fillet on the inside here. Give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This will be sitting here like that, and I'll come back on the inside and do a fillet right around on the back like so. I'm not sure how much of the camera is seeing that, but hopefully enough. And if you haven't noticed, it is springtime Florida fly season, and they're out in droves right now. I've already killed one. There's another one right there. Let's see if I can get this so that you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just applying it just in front of the cutout here. I don't really have to apply it any farther than that because it's going to push itself forward. But I am giving it a fairly good amount because I do want it to push forward and sort of give itself an auto fillet as it pushes forward. So I'm slathering it on fairly thick there. All right. Now we're going to push these forward, and I can feel the resistance of the glue. And I'm going to push it right to here. And I'm going to make sure on all three sides, on all three fin slots, that I'm not seeing the centering ring anywhere there, which I'm not. That's a good thing. Now that I've done that, and this I'm not going to try and show on camera, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this amount of glue here and apply it to that ring, to the back side of this ring here. And if I make any mistakes and get any glue on the motor mount tube, I'm just going to wipe that away because I want the motor mount tube to be as clean as possible right now. I am going to be adding a retainer ring to that later on. Plus the other centering ring is going to be going on there. So I'm holding this fairly tightly here so it doesn't shift or slide forward any further than it already is. I don't want it to move forward. So I'm using my hand as some moderate clamping pressure there while I apply this glue on the inside. You can see that I'm working it on the inside seam here. Titebond is good stuff because it grabs hold fairly quickly. It remains liquid for a good while, but it grabs a hold of your cardboard. Some people have noticed to their detriment how fast it grabs a hold of their cardboard if they use Titebond for couplers, which I try not to do. I will be using epoxy for bonding my coupler because if you've ever had this happen to you, you use Titebond for your coupler and you're sliding your coupler in, and the next thing you know, you can't move your coupler any farther because the Titebond has already done its job and you're up the creek. Now what I'm doing is I'm just cleaning up any little bits of glue that I may have left behind so that they don't become a problem when I add this final centering ring in place, which I won't be doing anytime soon. Okay. Now I'm just going to give this a very gentle tug to make sure that it's not moving anywhere. That's what I wanted to feel. I wanted to make sure it wasn't going anywhere because we're going to go ahead and start bonding our fins now. We've gotten to the point now where this isn't moving around, and we have, let me see if you can get in there. You can see the glue fillet that has been pushed forward of that centering ring as I moved it up, which is what we wanted to see. We may come back later on with some epoxy to strengthen that bond there, but that looks pretty good. I'm fairly happy with that. And I think it's okay to go ahead and start moving on with the fins. Now, unlike with low power kits, there's no piece of paper that you have to cut out and tape around and mark for your fins because they're already pre-done. That's one of the great things about so many mid-power kits, especially from Apogee. Apogee does this a lot. So all we have to do is just slide in place and then make sure that we have them aligned. I'm going to eyeball it. I know that there's plenty of people who hate that idea, think that eyeballing their fins is the worst thing in the world. For a simple mid-power 3-fin and a nose cone rocket, there's, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with eyeballing it. Not a big deal. I am going to go ahead and swap out to a new Q-tip here, because this one's starting to look a little gnarly, and I've got a fresh one right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply glue. There's that fly again. I'm going to apply glue here and here and along the front edge here. And then once I've applied this, and I'll probably be doing this off camera, I'm going to line it by eye, and then I'm going to gently tack it in place with some super glue and spray, and then move on to the next one. But we'll see how much of this I can do on camera here, because I'd like to try and get most of this done on camera if I can. So. A lot of the strength from these fins is also going to come from the epoxy fillets that we'll do near the end of the build. All right, that's looking good. That's aligned pretty well. And just like with before, I'm just going to tack this in place with just a little bit of super glue. And I don't really have to worry about the super glue looking funky here, because it's going to get covered with those epoxy fillets. So I don't have to try and smooth out the super glue here. Not too much anyway. And these are just tacked in place. The only job for this stuff is just to keep it from wiggling around. That's it. Okay. First one's in place and looking straight up and down. And we'll go on to the next. Oops. Pardon me while I knock everything over here. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to my pot here. Glue pot. That's more than enough. Same thing. We're going to apply glue to the root edges where they will contact the motor mount. Man, that fly is really sowing his oats over here, isn't he? And we're going to apply glue to the front here where it's going to make contact with the front centering ring. We're not going to do anything to the back because the back centering ring isn't in place yet. And I'm just sort of rocking it into place a little bit, like so. Nice thing about this model is that the fins aren't very big. They're not very tall, very long fins, which means that they kind of stay in place fairly quickly once you place them there. Like, I'm going to still tack this with super glue, but that tight bond has already given me a pretty good grip. Still don't trust it. Still going to go ahead and tack it in place. See, I don't really use a lot. I don't want to use a lot. And this stuff does nothing structural. Don't ever use super glue for anything structural. except gluing your fingers together. It's great for that. All right. I moved the glue away from the accelerator. I don't know if you noticed that. Because I did learn my lesson one time when I had the glue sitting open and the accelerator hit the top of it, and basically the entire bottle of super glue turned into one big rock overnight because of just a little bit of accelerator. So I don't do that no more. All right, second one's in place, and it's already feeling pretty good. And you can see, let me see if I can give you a good view here. You can see how they're holding pretty well against the motor tube here. We are going to come back and do internal fillets on these. That's one thing that we can do with mid-power rockets that you don't normally do with low-power rockets. But let's go ahead and move right on to the third and final fin. I'm going to set this upright for the moment. There we go. While I apply the last little bit of glue. You can get glue up in here as well if you want to, but it's not particularly necessary because your fillets are going to cover that up real well. I just really like to have a fairly good bead of glue against this root so that you get a good bond against your motor mount. That's the biggest thing for me. Okay, let's go ahead and get that in place. Rock it down. The beauty of having your fin slots pre-cut through the wall fin slots is you can do a real good job eyeballing since the fin slots are already perfectly cut at 120-degree angles. So it doesn't really take, like, you can still screw it up, don't get me wrong. You can still get this and screw it up and go off one side or the other, but it definitely makes things a lot easier. It makes screw-ups a little harder to do. Never trust something that's idiot-proof, though, because they can always give you a better idiot. And I'm usually that one. There we go. Okay. So those are the tacks. I'm going to do one final eyeball check. He's looking good. I'm not going to spray it just yet. I'm just going to go around all three sides. Yeah, looks good all ways around. Okay. And that's it for the fins. How about that? Let's go ahead and close this up here. And close this up here. And see, it mentions a fin jig, alignment jig here that you can buy separately. And these are great. You can also find them, you can also download these and find them online if you want to cut them out of cardboard yourself. They're pretty cool. Let's move on to page 5. There we go. Sorry while I fool around there. So the directions say to use internal wood glue or epoxy fillets to the inside here. We are going to use epoxy fillets. I'm not going to do that right now. And the reason I'm not going to do that right now is because I want this glue to dry up just a little bit before I get to that point here. So before I go on to the fillets and adding the final centering ring, which I don't want to do now, we're going to move on forward, and we're going to skip up to step 16 here so that we can do the coupler real fast. And we're going to do that with epoxy. We're not going to do that with Titebond for all the reasons that I literally just finished talking to you about. 5-minute epoxy works a lot better than Titebond for putting your coupler on. Now, some couplers you want to do one side and then leave it alone. So we're just going to skip forward and make sure that we are going to do the coupler on both sides at the same time here, which we are. We're going to start with the coupler with the top tube, and then we're going to move to the back tube. I do love the Apogee nose cones here. This is a 5-to-1 ogive shape, which gives you a really, really long, curved, sharp nose cone. I think these are really cool. I like the Apogee nose cones a lot. So the coupler is 6 inches long. We want to mark it at 3 inches, which is right there. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure to deburr the inside of the tube here so that we can slide the coupler in easily, like so. Okay. I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy for this, because this does not need 30-minute epoxy tends to be stronger, but we don't need to be waiting 30 minutes just to get a bond on this. I've tried a lot of different 5-minute epoxies over the years, and I used to use this DevCon product a lot because it was inexpensive and easy to get via Amazon. But I've noticed that for whatever reason, it tends to the resin side of things, not the hardener side of things, tends to get affected by my humidity here in South Florida quickly, very, very quickly. And that's only just recently started happening. I don't know if DevCon has some sort of product change, but I don't like it. It doesn't really give me a strong enough bond, something that I feel comfortable with any longer. So I don't use it unless it's like completely fresh. The JB Weld 5-minute, you can get this stuff pretty much anywhere. Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace, pretty much all of those places carry it. It's inexpensive as well. It's maybe a little bit more expensive than DevCon, but it does the trick. And it's good. It's a good, strong product. That's way more than I need, but it's easier to mix up a slightly larger amount versus a tiny amount. high power Rocketeers are cringing right now because they see me whipping this epoxy and whipping the air into it. And they're going, no, it's going to kill the bond. And you know what? They're absolutely right. If you whip air into an epoxy for something that's going to be structural, especially for something that's going to be, say, going Mach 1 or above, or going really, really high where there's going to be temperature variations, you really don't want to be whipping your epoxy in like that. And there's a lot of people who use slow epoxy and they even degas it, which is perfectly fine. However, if you're doing low power, mid power, or even level 1 rockets, and you're just using 5-minute epoxy, whipping it up like that with a little bit of air is not going to kill your model. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this and apply it to the inside of the tube here. And why am I not going to apply it here and then shove in? Well, that's pretty obvious. If I applied it to this section here and then shoved it down this way, it's going to make a big old mess right over here. It's going to make like just a huge seam of a mess here that I'd have to clean up. But if I apply it liberally here and then push this in, then that will create a nice fillet on the inside right here that I'll be able to use as a structural component, and it won't break away as easily. And it's a funny thing to say, but what I'm doing is I'm applying liberally, but not too liberally. I don't want to make a mess. I want plenty of epoxy in here to give me a really good bond, because I don't want this separating. I don't want it going anywhere. But I don't want so much that it's going to create a giant mess. Okay, that should do it. Let's go ahead and slide that in, twisting as we slide to create plenty of contact. And you can see from the inside there that I've got myself a decent small fillet of epoxy that's pushed forward. That's going to take a couple minutes to set up. And I don't really need this for anything else right now, so that's going to be trash. Looks like I didn't really waste too much there, just a little bit, a couple milliliters. I'm going to set this off to the side. And now let's see whether or not we're in good shape to apply our fillets here. I think we are. The glue has set enough. It's tacky but pretty firm. And we are definitely in good shape here to create our fillets. So we're going to go ahead and whip that now. And what I'm going to make my fillets out of is JB Weld. No, not frog tape. But I'll show you what I use the frog tape for. Take a few pieces of your frog tape, lay it out here on top of the plastic, and you have a good mixing palette for your JB Weld. my gosh, this is a new one. I haven't opened this one up yet. Okay. Wow. Gonna make sure I don't accidentally cut into the JB Weld itself when I do this, because that would stink. Literally, JB Weld stinks. There we go. Didn't realize that I got to open up a new pack today. I shouldn't be that excited about it. JB Weld is 1-to-1. If you've never used it before, 1-to-1 ratio. If you're going to err on the side of caution, always have a little bit more hardener than epoxy, but I try to make it as even as possible because I hate winding up with leftover of one bottle and not enough of the other. That's definitely too much hardener, but that's okay. Yeah. There. Now I'm happy. This stuff takes forever. Well, not forever. This takes hours to set up. That's one of the things that you have to be aware of with regular JB Weld. There is JB Weld Quick. This stuff right here, which is good for a lot of non-structural items, but I wouldn't trust it with too many things for rocket building. I just happen to have it for other items, other projects. We're going to give this a nice, good mix to a gray consistency. And this is another one that you can actually degas if you have a vacuum chamber. And plenty of people do that. There's a Braden from Rocket Vlogs, for instance. He has built rockets that go to Mach 2 and 30,000 feet on nothing but JB Weld. And because it is very, very strong stuff. But one of the things he does when he does those high performance rockets is he makes sure to degas it to get as much of the air out of it as possible. Like I said earlier, though, in this case, we don't have to do that. We're not rocket scientists here. We're just trying to have fun with a mid-power rocket that we can fly and enjoy. But we're going to make it nice and strong in case we decide that we want to put like an H motor in. Let me see if I can find a stick here. Sorry about that. Pause for just a second. I needed to find another one of these, and we are ready to go. So what we're going to do, and I'm not sure how much, I'm probably going to have to do most of this off of camera, but I'm going to try and do some. I'm going to load up my Q-tip with this epoxy, and then I'm going to get it down into these areas here where the fin mates up with the motor tube itself. And I'm going to be real careful not to get any here or anywhere around here where the final centering ring is going to go. Not until the very, very end. And then at the very end, I am going to actually use this for the centering ring. But let's go ahead and go. We're going to load it up. And if I'm going to accidentally touch, I'd rather accidentally touch on the inside of the body tube, not near the motor mount tube. Internal fillets do not have to look perfect. Most of them don't, unless you're doing liquid epoxy fillets on a high power motor, and even then most of them still don't. Really what you're trying to do is just get a good bond between your fin and your motor mount. Your fin's going to be so much stronger being bonded to the motor mount versus a surface mount. See, I already got a little bit of epoxy right there. I'm just going to wipe off so it's smooth. I don't care if I get epoxy on the motor mount lower down. I just don't want to screw up getting the centering ring placed properly. And the reason why we use JB Weld or any other thick epoxy like this is because it's what we call thixotropic, which means you can apply it and you can keep it on a vertical surface, and for the most part it won't slump, it won't roll down and pool down at the bottom of wherever you applied it. It will just stay on the vertical surface that you've applied it to. And that's exactly what you need for things like this, because I'm going to be applying, first of all, I'm doing all 6 fillets at once, which you can do with this, but you can't necessarily do with other epoxies. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and apply the centering ring and lock everything up, and then just keep all of it in place. I've been real heavy with this epoxy today, and if I was building this rocket so that I wanted to get extra height, I might not do this. You know, I might want to keep it as light as possible so that I could go higher. But in this case, I just want to build this so that it's pretty much bulletproof, so you guys can sort of see what that might look like. Okay. Now I've got good fillets all around. And because, like I mentioned, this does not, this takes forever to set, now I'm going to go ahead and apply JB Weld back here as well. I am still going to clean it around from the motor mount. I'll show you why in a little bit. For this wood to cardboard, for the centering ring, excuse me, I'm so sorry. For this wood to cardboard right here on the centering ring, I am still going to use wood glue. I don't mind if a little wood glue and JB Weld mix. They're not going to hurt each other. And we're going to place this and slide it all the way down like so. And because I want to put a retainer ring on my motor mount, I'm going to make sure that it's pretty well cleaned off of any excess epoxy right now. And that's it. That's the heart of any rocket right there. We've finished up the main part of it. We've done the body too. We've done the motor mounts and the fins. Fins are still in good condition. They're aligned properly. You can see that the shock cord is still pushed down in there right now. That's where it's going to stay for a little bit longer. And I'm going to set this aside for just a moment. And here's how I get to clean this mess up right here so that I don't have to worry about it. Boom, trash is done. I'm going to take a minute and put away my JB Weld. We're going to keep this out because we're about to use this again. First of all, let's test that. Okay, so that's bonded well. And we've just finished up step 13 here. We just skipped around as I reminded you, but we finished up step 13 here. We did epoxy fillets. We put the centering ring on. Step 15 right here, I always do this at the very, very end. This is the external fillets. I literally don't do this until the whole model is built, so that'll be later on tonight. In the meantime, though, let's go ahead and get the upper part of the tube bonded into the lower part of the tube and get the shock cord taken care of. Same situation. Just a dab will do you. And if you're not comfortable eyeballing the measurements when you measure out your epoxy, you can absolutely do it with each half in a separate cup. I do that actually with things like 15 or 30-minute epoxies. But for the 5-minute epoxy, I feel pretty comfortable eyeballing it. Same thing as with the JB Weld. If you're going to err on the side of caution and have a little bit more of the hardener than the actual resin. But just to be aware that if you do that too much, if you add too much hardener and not enough resin, you get a crap bond. It doesn't work. It's very brittle and will break on you. And it's always going to do that when the model's in the air coming down, because that's Murphy's Law for rocketry. We're going to do the same thing we did last time. First of all, let me just make sure that This is going to slide in evenly and easily. This is just a me thing. You feel free to do with this as you wish, but when I'm bonding tubes like this, I like to make sure that the seams are even. Part of the reason why I feel that way is because I don't often fill these seams. Like, you know, this isn't a seam you can fill, that you won't see that, but this seam here, this seam here. Some people like to fill these seams. There's nothing wrong with that. In a few models, I also fill my seams. But for something like this, I don't bother. I don't feel like it's necessary, and I actually like the look of the seams. I feel like it adds something to the aesthetic of the rocket. That may be my excuse for being lazy and not wanting to fill a seam, but you can do with that information what you will. You'll notice that I'm keeping the shock cord still in the motor mount right now, and that's because I don't want to risk getting any epoxy on the shock cord. I'd like this to be fully bonded before we move on to that step. I'd like this epoxy to be completely cured. So I'm not even going to push that shock cord out until this has been cured up. All right, so that's a good layer of epoxy on the inside there that you can see. Not too much. And I'm going to go ahead and bond these two together, twist them around a little bit so that they've got a good connection, and then match up these seams like so. Another thing that I like to do, I'm going to set this like this for just a moment. When epoxy is bonding for two halves of a body tube, I like to try and keep them as tightly pressed together as possible. The epoxy is very loose at this point, and you see how the gap has already formed because it sort of slides out on its own. I can do that and see how that gap forms. I'm hoping that comes through on the camera. And that's not much of a gap, but it's enough to be noticeable. And I don't like it. So I'm going to take a couple pieces of tape while I'm putting positive pressure down on the rocket. And keep that gap as small as possible. And I'll tape it in 2 or 3 places. You're never gonna have no gap at all. That's just not happening. But you can mitigate it at least a little bit if you do this. There we go. Cool. I'm happy with that. All right. That's the main body tube sorted out. We're just going to let that cure. And when we come back, we'll deal with the shock cord. I'll show you what this is for, and then we'll start taping it up for the external fillets. So we'll see you then.